So welcome back to those of you who are with us this morning. I can see that Omar is here, so that's perfect. Hi Omar. I can see some of the faces that we saw this morning as well. So and our American friends are joining us, even though for some of you, especially you, David, is, I think, very early in the morning. So thank you so much for being with us at this very, very early hour for you in California. So today's, this afternoon's panel is a bit longer than the one we had this morning. So we're going to have 4 participants. And as I said, there's been a little change in the program. And we're going to hear Omar FASSATOUI first. So now, 2 o'clock, then we'll hear Heather Shalky. Hello, Heather. Very nice to see you. Then we'll listen to David Henry Anthony from the University of California, Santa Cruz. And we will therefore finish the panel with Mara Ann Hauser from Wichita Baptist University. So let's start. This afternoon's panel then will be first devoted to Islam, with Omar FASSATOUI, who comes from Aix-Marseille University. You are an associate researcher at the Mesopolis Center of Political Sciences of the Political Sciences Institute at Aix-en-Provence, France. So Omar, since your PhD, you've worked on bioethics issues, religious law, and positive law in Muslim and Jewish contexts. And you're currently working as a human rights officer at the United Nations Human Rights Commission, where you specialize on racism and discrimination-related issues. And today, your presentation is entitled Race in Islam, Perceptions and Realities. So you're going to have 25 minutes, as all the other participants. Can I please ask the members of the audience to turn their microphones off during the presentations of the papers? And then when we're going to have some time for the discussions, you can use the raise your hand function on Zoom in order to ask your questions and offer your comments. Omar, so the online floor is yours. So whenever you're ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, organizers, and thank you for allowing me to have some space for Islam among this missiology with Christianity mostly. I was honored when I was contacted by the organizers to come and take part to this event, so I will try to combine my previous experience as a researcher and my actual experience as a human rights officer working on racism on this paper, focusing on race in Islam. So I would like to start with these ideas. Why will I articulate my paper today is I decided to put it into between theoretical Islam and Islam in practice. I mean, when it comes to race, and I will use race as a lens to observe some phenomena that we can see today in Islam as a religion, but also as a society model and as a historical process. So when observing Islam by the lenses of race, it's very obvious that there are some interesting issues that we can focus on, particularly today as with the spread of international movements defending racial movements like Black Lives Matters, and how they are perceived and how they are seen by Muslim societies, and how it gave the occasion to some minorities to rise and some voice to also rise. When we choose a historical approach to race in the Muslim context, it can appear as a very interesting element in the Islamization. I mean, how people became Muslim during history and how Islam went out from the Arabian Peninsula to the world, and especially in certain diasporic contexts, where it is interesting to see how Islam is combined with race to bring a new identity, especially in the United States and the Americas in general. So even before leaving its birth context, Islam started as a multiracial religion, and then it continued through the Muslim empires and Muslim history. And it is today a specific question in Muslim societies of today to see how you define yourself. If you're questioning your Muslim definition as a Muslim or as a race belonging to one race or to another. And we will see through this paper how it goes in, through examples. Race is also interesting when we focus on the path that Islam made from Arabia to Africa first and then to the Americas, as I said, because it's very interesting to see how conversions were made because of the content of racial content, let's say, of Islamic texts and sources. It is also interesting to examine the history of slavery because it is a bit forgotten that Arabs were among the first slavers of the world, and it is something that is now being forgotten or maybe obscured unless you go to Zanzibar and you enter a museum and then you see how Arabs were among the first enslavers before the triangular slave market between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. It's very interesting to see how all these elements are combined in today's Muslim societies. I will also link it with migration. It is interesting to question race, migration, and religion, either in the original context of Islam or in diasporic Muslim context, where people are questioning these new identities and trying to have their own, either being seen as a Muslim or being seen as belonging to a particular race, particularly Black Muslim as an identity in a diasporic context is something that can be very interesting to examine depending where you are in the Americas or in Europe or even sometimes in Africa, but I'm speaking about Northern African context that I will examine lately. So as I said, I will speak about race in Islam and the texts and the figures, which are the first sources that we can analyze. So I will say that Islam is, as a religion, is a text that is full of meanings of equality between men and women, between men first, and then no matter the color of their skin or the tribe they belong to. And this is maybe due to the fact that Islam was born in a context that was very marked with inequalities, where castes, tribes, and race was also a part of your identity. I mean, as a person, who you are was determined by the color of your skin or the lineage of your father or the tribe that you belong to. And that was something that Islam was against since the beginning. And it brought that among the first converted persons to this new religion, slaves were among the first slaves from actual Eritrea or Ethiopia, what we used to call Abyssinians. At that moment, Al-Habasha in Arabic was interesting to see that among the first Muslims, Bilal as a figure also is very interesting to examine, because it's used very much today as a figure, as a black figure that is used as a reference to racial connections in Islam. So the Quran as a text is full of references sharing contents of equality between men, because it is the message itself is destined to mankind, not to a race or to a person or to a group of person in particular. The text is full of references speaking about the variety of people, of colors, of race, and that there is no difference between those people from the moment that they belong to the same religion and they access to the truth. So I said the message is universal and there is no difference, and we can see it not only in the text, because I'm not quoting all the ayat of the Quran that mention that there is no difference between any man on the basis of color, but we can see it also in practice that a religion is a substitute to race or to any other personal identity. This is the original message in the Quran and in the religious references. We can see it also in practice. For example, when we see family laws of Islam, there is no difference between men belonging to any race or to any racial group. From the moment that this person belongs to Islam or is officially Muslim, the person has all the rights that are granted under Islamic laws, and no matter the territory they are in. Even before the nationality, if you were a member of a Muslim community in Asia and you move to the Maghreb, then you will be considered as a member of the same community, and nothing will change because the rules will be the same, and you can marry women inside that group. I mean, this was very important because women are not allowed, for example, to marry a man who is not Muslim, but this is the only prerequisite. It is the only condition that you can find in family law, that if somebody is Muslim, then it's there is no other condition that can be required. Same thing for the political power. There is no conditions of being from one race or one ethnic group, because if we analyze the Islamic history, we can see that even the caliphates had people that were not from the so-called superior group, which are the Arabs, the first destinaries of the message, because we can see that incredible scholars or political responsibles were either from Persian origin or from African origin or from any other Muslim context, but not mainly Arabs. So we can see it in the family laws, we can see it in political power and scientific research. Most of the scholars were not from the first group of Islam or the first, let's say, racial group. And we can see it also in spaces where mosques are very egalitarian, where people stand next to other, no matter what the colors are. And it's very visible in the diasporic context when you can see in the images people, or during the Hajj, you can see people from variety of races just following the same precepts of Islam. As I said, this equality is very enrooted in the definition of Islam, especially in comparison of the pre-Islamic context. And even the notion of Ummah itself is belonging to one nation, not one state or one race or one nationality. It's belonging to Ummah based on religion. And this doesn't mean that Islam does not put a hierarchy of persons, but it does not differentiate between Muslims themselves, but between Muslim and non-Muslims, because there is a difference between different categories that are not on the basis of race, but on the basis of religion. The first are people of the book, i.e. Christians and Jews who are living in the Muslim context, and then those who do not belong. We see a lot of discrimination toward those who do not belong to any monotheistic book-based religion, such as Christian or Jews, and the category of kafirs is a very bad category in Muslim context that can allow even enslaving. So that's something that we can see very easily during history and even the days. So if I had to connect race with missiology or da'wah in Islam, because that's the closest concept that we can have today, it's very interesting to see how promoting racial equality was something seen as very positive characteristic of Islam, and it helped a lot. It spread in African context mainly, especially when linking it with the freeing slaves, even if the Quran itself recognized slavery as a right, but it conditioned it to certain conditions that are not the principle. I mean, it's a practice to avoid, but it's still a right and a practice that it is possible to do for Muslims. The analysis of da'wah is interesting to see how I call it. I wanted to put a difference between da'wah and its old version and the new version. What I call new version is the faith-based charities, maybe, that contribute to the da'wah, that are targeting, for example, people who are in prison or people in humanitarian contexts. We know perfectly well that before, I mean, during history, bringing the message of equality and bringing the message and the figure of Bilal as the first muezzin of Islam, was something very positive to spread the word of Islam in Africa and in other contexts where you can even as a person that is belonging to a specific ethnic group, you can reach the top of the positions of any Islamic state. And as I said, we had many experiences before on caliphs and the very high, for example, Qadi or Imam that are belonging to a racial different community than the majority of Arab or a Berber or Persian group. So race was part of, I don't know if Islam was conscious about the power of having this racial equality speech in its da'wah at the beginning, because it's you know that in Islam, the da'wah conversions or attracting people is made by both ways, either what we call targhib or tarhib, which means either by attracting people to your religion, by your behavior, or to pushing them to convert by war or by attacking them. And we can speak, for example, of conversion in Asia that was not made via war or via territorial contest, but it was made by Muslim traders who went even to China, and then by this contact, this conversion were more easy to do. So I wanted just to maybe question the fact that were they conscious about the impact of this racial equality and having people that are looking the same. I did a comparison between the fact, for example, that in Christian history or in even today, people who are from the Black community in the Americas have the tendency to represent their saints as Black persons, or even Jesus himself as a figure is represented in Black churches as a Black person. But it's interesting to see how this figures already exist in Islam, and it was something very maybe positive for people to connect with Black persons from Abyssinian origins during the history of Islam, and to see that there is no racial discrimination inside the text, but the practice is a bit different. Second thing, as I said, is the new da'wah that is made. It's not an invitation to convert, but to convert to a certain vision of Islam. I am not aware of any anti-racial discrimination content in Salafism, for example, or in radical groups, but we see that the charities are using the values of equality, of no race, everything is everyone is welcome, no matter the race you belong to. It's something that we can see in the preachers, the new preachers, or even in the speech of those who are doing this new da'wah in new spaces, such as the faith-based charities in diasporic contexts, especially. Many young people are being attracted by this very egalitarian and no race difference speech in Islam, especially in Europe and in the West. And we see that the number of converted people is really driven by the fact that people are belonging to a religious-based community where your original identity is melted to become either a brother or a sister. If you are a woman, it's not your skin, it's really belonging to this community. As I said, it's really interesting to see how even this branding of Islam is being made as a very egalitarian religion in the text, but realities are a bit different, because I would like to raise the issue of racism in the Muslim world and even issue of slavery, because there is this in practice, unfortunately, there is this difference between Arabs are still thinking, unfortunately, that they are the original holders of the truth, of the true Islam, because they have this mastery of language. And when we see that, even, for example, for Black Islam in Africa, people can know the Quran by heart, but they know it in Arabic without even speaking the language. I mean, this contributes to the permanence of the supremacy of Arabs as destinaries of Islam or of the Quran. And when we see the practice, for example, when we see how slavery and the new forms of slaveries are being made in the Gulf countries, for example, or even in the Maghreb or in the Middle East, it's very interesting to see how the narrative is completely different when we see that Black Muslims in the Arab world are not really very welcome. We see that we have so many complaints based on racism, and same thing happens for people coming either from Asia. The same thing, I mean, on race, can be discriminated even if they are Muslim, and even if they live in a Muslim context, they can be discriminated on the basis of race. And in practice, I would like to say that there is a huge difference between the text and the practice, where your identity, when you pretend that you are just a Muslim coming to they put race